Hey internet, Swag here. It's been a while since the Impulse chips came out, and now with the Vector gadget into the mix, it is quite easy to set up yourself some CV2 setups that make use of these Impulse chips. But the real power that comes with them is when you create your own custom vector. So we'll be going over what is a vector, how do you make one, using a player in the calculations that make one, and using that to create ourselves a jetpack. So without further ado, let's get on it. So here we have the vector gadget. The vector gadget is an arrow. You can give it a predefined magnitude, and you can use it as the direction for your impulse chip. So if we turn our gadgets off, and we now grab our arrow, which has the vector chip added to it, you will see that the ball in the background, now see that the ball in the background will bounce based on the way the arrow is pointing. So this is a pretty static vector. Over here we have a bit more of a dynamic one. Now I put in some circuitry to give a visual representation of how the vector looks, but we basically have some math here that subtracts the position of sphere number 2 from the position of sphere number 1 and calculates a vector based on that, which creates this arrow. And once I wire this up to our impulse chip, the ball now moves based upon the relative position of our spheres. The beauty of this thing, in contrast to the vector gadget, is that this one also increases in magnitude as we increase the distance. And also we can use number 2 to stretch it even further and get all opposition based on relative distance. So let me turn on gadgets and see how you get to these calculations. So we start with a creation object getAll with tag. This chip will output a list with all the objects that have the tag of sphere 1. That goes through a getElement chip, which gets element number 0, which, because there is only one object in this list, will always be that object, because there is only one sphere number 1 in the room. Then we get that position, split that into its 3 coordinates, and all of those 3 coordinates get subtracted by the coordinates of sphere 2, which we return its position with a very similar setup. So all of these positions get subtracted and then go into a vector create. This is funneled into the impulse set chip, and you see here that the trigger volume is set to activate upon objects entering with the value of the object, which is put into the impulse set chip, so that every time the ball bounces on the floor and hits the trigger volume, force gets applied. Now, to make this whole thing into a jetpack, I made some preparations. This button will save someone's name and also display it real nicely. It's currently controlled by me. I can press it again to take control away from myself and set it back to void. This whole setup is not really relevant. All that we need to know is that this button saves the player value, which we will be using as our sphere 2. Here we have our controllers, of which the average will be sphere 1. You can see that the pivot point is quite high. This is because the position of the object is gotten by the pivot point. So putting this one quite a bit above the player will mean that the vector that will be created from the center of my head to the average of the two controllers will be pointing upwards, which, you know, if you're making a jetpack, it's cool if the impulse, the thrust, is pointed upwards, because else it's not going anywhere. So let's start building that. First of all, we need to get the position of these two controllers. Well, luckily we already have a setup as such right here. Here we go. It is just that our controllers have a little bit different of a tag. So this is CT right and CT left. Controller right and controller left. Now to get the average, just add every single coordinate. X with X, Y with Y, and Z with Z. And then we divide by the value of 2. Very important that you change this. Not a mathematician, but I heard that if you divide by 0, bad things happen. And now if we would turn this into a vector create, we will create a position that is the average of these two controllers, but we still have to divide this or subtract this. Either we subtract this from the player's position or subtract the position of the player from this value. Either or. As I said, not a mathematician. I'm more of a slap circuits together and see what hopefully works kind of guy. Get position of the player that has loaded themselves into the button. Not physically, just the player's data. We get position of our player. We vector split that one as well. And now we have the position of our player, and that needs to be... What was I saying again? The player is sphere 1 and the controller... No, the player is sphere 2 and the controllers are sphere 1, right? Alright. Let's just subtract this position. Oh. From that position, get an impulse add. Also a vector create. To actually turn this whole thing into a vector again. And that is the direction in which it will be moving. Event receiver. And we will add an impulse at 30 Hz per second. With the object that the impulse is being applied to being the player that loaded themselves into the button. If I wire this up correctly, when I load myself into the button, I should be moved somewhat towards the average position of the pivot point of both controllers. If I subtracted the wrong thing, I will move the other way. So let's see where I will go. Well, screwed that one up now, didn't I? As I said, not a mathematician. So we subtract the player's position from the controllers, and that should do the thing. Now if I stop flying, oh boy, that's quite responsive. I think that might be a bit too excessive. What if we lower the speed just a tad? But what if we put it to 3? Also, we probably want to keep these controllers in place while we're doing this. Let's get an animation gizmo and place them to there. Add a frame to your animation gizmo and just set it to play. This way you will always end up back here. Man, it's still pretty crazy. Let's set speed to 1 then. Yeah, that feels a bit more proper. That's not a controller. You know what also really helps with actually being able to fly with your controllers? That's right, making them grabbable. Here we go. Reason they're environmental and not decorative is because decorative invention tend to fly around a little bit. So I'm gonna turn flying off, turn the jetpack on, keep them as low as possible. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, this is definitely sending me places. Oh. But I think it's still a bit much, but I think that is a working jetpack. Whoa, 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 whoa. Woo! And that is a jetpack. I hope this vid helped you make sense of vectors and impulses. And if you feel inspired to make an impulse chip build of your own, please share it on the Rec Room Discord, because I would love to have a look at it. If you want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. But most importantly, I hope you use your newfound knowledge wisely. And to see you in the next one. Swag away!